Welcome to the Lovecars on the Grid podcast, your global motorsport roundup with me, Tiff, Needell and Paul Woodman.
Welcome to Lovecars on the Grid, your global motorsport podcast roundup, and it's an incredible weekend of motorsport throughout the world. It was Sacre Bleu in France, Formula One, there's Formula 2. There was a bit of W Series, which we'll come on to as well. You'll never guess who won the W Series race, but we will come on to that in a moment. NASCAR, Indycar, Superbikes, there's so much action going on.
Booing in NASCAR, booing.
It was. We'll
Don't
come
tell
on to
Lewis Hamilton. They were booing the winner in NASCAR.
Well, was he the winner? We'll come on to that in a moment. But first, I think we should pay tribute to a motorsport legend, a great, which was the Paddy Hopkirk, who very famous for racing minis, and not quite your era, Tiff, but certainly some fond memories of Paddy.
Oh, lovely man, because he was president of the BRDC, so I interviewed him at the Silverstone Classic several times. I meet him at BRDC occasions, and just a lovely, charming man. Quite a few promo jobs I did when I was a BMW ambassador, of course, Mini, and when it was BMW, we'd be together having a laugh, And he was just the most gorgeous man. He's a bit like a Murray Walker style person from rally. He actually raced quite a lot. People think he was just a rally driver, but he started off racing TR2s and Austin Healey's, and he did things like the Mille Miglia and Targa Florio and things. And amazing, because he was racing in the 50s and 60s, and then rallying became the main thing. And then, of course, he won the Monte Carlo rally. So historically, people always forget that when he won that. I do point out, not distracting from his achievement, that it was a handicap formula when he first won it. In fact, the big American car on Volvo was actually quickest overall, but that's a minute, don't want to spoil a good story. But no, he was 89 years old, had a wonderful life, and he will always be very fondly remembered.
I didn't know a great deal about him, I'll be honest with you, but a few years ago we did something with Mini. They did a modern day tribute Paddy Hopkirk car, which was red with the white. If you with white, so it was interesting to find out a little bit about the man then. Okay, so Formula One, Paul Ricard, poor old Ferrari, poor old Charles. What's going on? Well, I mean, there's a couple of things there, because there's a bit of a mess with Ferrari and their strategy. There's no question.
Well, there wasn't really on that occasion the strategy. I think we'll go to the science thing. I mean, with Charlie. Oh, sorry. I mean, the worst thing is it was the French Grand Prix. I love the way those. I'm going to cough again now, make a noise. The French flags had obviously given out to the crowd. It was wonderful to the huge grandstands. Of course, one of the biggest grandstands where he ended up putting in the barriers. It was going to be such a great home victory, but it might not have been. I mean, it was a fantastic race. This was the thing, Max had pushed him, couldn't get past him, wore his tyres out trying to push him, so he pitted first. Ferrari would then say, well, we'll stay out for 5 more laps. I mean, LeClerc was going to come back out behind Max, because Max obviously was quicker on the new tyres, having stopped earlier. So he would have had this race of Leclerc on newer tyres chasing down Max and hopefully taking the lead on the last lap, and all those French flags would have been waving like mad. But it didn't happen. I mean, he was pushing. That's the whole point, because he knew that he was losing tenths of a second every lap, because Max was out on the fresher tyres. So the gap when he came out of the pits was just getting bigger and bigger. He knew he was going to come out behind. So he was pushing, 10 tenths, 100% flat out, and he just overstepped the mark by a couple of miles an hour or something tiny, and off he went.
It was such a shame, and you felt for him so much. We all make mistakes at that highest level.
Well, yeah. In fact, we talked about when we watched the motorbike. We've often said of MotoGP, leaders, falling out, crashing on their own in the lead. We've always said that you never see that in motor race. You never see a Grand Prix driver fall off while in the lead, which happens quite often in MotoGPs and twos. So it was a shock, but of course he'd fallen off earlier. At Monza, he wasn't. Not Imola, he fell off, didn't he, while chasing? I feel so sorry for him.
I feel sorry for him as well. But of all the circuits in the world to fall off, you would think Paul Ricard, you've got a fairly good chance of getting back on again, because there's so much runoff area. And Tiff, is it a race? I mean, a 2-horse race in a field, in a large field?
Well, it's a Grand Prix, Paul. You youngsters in your Caterhams and Formula Fords. I was talking about Formula Fords. You talk about Caterham racing, where it's racing from corner 1 to the last corner. Grand Prix are tactical, they're long distance. Of course, we lost, Sainz at the back of the grid, so we only had one Ferrari up front. Perez was having another off weekend. And I just tweeted today how Autosport magazine, what was the quote on the front page of last Thursday's magazine? It was something like, oh yes, has Perez ended the Red Bull curse? There's now a number 2 driver that can Max Verstappen, Max, whatever it was, Max. But of course he didn't all weekend at Ricciardo. He was slow in qualifying, and then he got overtaken at the start of the race, by Lewis. And then of course he got attacked by George, literally. We'll go on to that maybe later. So, if Perez was on the pace and we'd had the other Ferrari up there and the Mercedes just get a bit quicker, we could, for the first time since forever, have 6 cars, dicing for the lead of a Grand Prix. I mean, it won't be like Caterham's. It'll be tactical.
So if Mercedes get a bit quicker, but Mercedes were quicker, 2 of their cars were quicker than the Red Bull. It happened to be the driver.
Well, in the race scenario, they see that this problem in qualifying. They can't just get the single lap times. Maybe they're tweaking the Honda engine up a bit and the Ferrari engines up a bit, risking the engineering for the race. But it could have been a great Grand Prix. But I mean, it was entertaining with George. I don't know about George. Sometimes he's the calmest. He's a sort of quiet little schoolboy, but then he shouts and moans quite loudly. And he was so wrong with that overtaking. I don't know where this other new rule. We went through the outside, didn't we? When we went back to Austria, we re-looked at going around the outside rule. They've got this stupid new rule that if your nose is half an inch ahead of the apex, you have the right of way. But of course, the bloke on the inside was fully committed, and we talked about that. The clashes were inevitable. And now, apparently, according to George, if you've even got your front wheel level with the rear wheel of the other car, you've got the line into the corner. Well,
but George was he never had the corner. He never had the corner. He needed
all the road, didn't he? So, I mean, the only way to not have an accident, Perez would have said, oh yes, George has got his front wheel level with my rear wheel. I will now have to go straight ahead because otherwise we will crash.
Yeah, which is ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. And it took Toto Wolff to come on the radio and say, calm him down.
Yeah.
Put your head down and get on with it. But get on with it. So the safety car definitely helped George. I think we should talk about that now. And a spectacular. I thought, what's he doing? He's leaving too much of a gap. But
I was to say, that was what I was about to say, because I need to look at the rule book. I mean, so the virtual safety comes out. The drivers have to drive. I don't know how many segments the tracks are made up of. I think there's a lot more segments than just the 3 we see in qualifying lap time. So each segment you have to do at a certain time, a certain average speed. But like we had this, as Perez said, that it came up safety car ending. And that usually happens pretty quickly. Every time we've lost his virtue, it happens I think it's supposed to be between 5 and 12 seconds or something, according to Perez, something like that. But George suddenly left this massive gap of the whole Mistral straight. I thought, flipping hell, if they flick the switch and go green, he's going to look a right mug. What is he doing? Then luckily, in a way, the virtual it extended longer, and he just caught Perez right when they switched the switch off, and Perez was caught napping, and George jumped him. But it was bizarre. Why did George leave such a huge gap when, as I understand it, the safety car could have been switched any second? And, it was all a bit bizarre. But then, of course, moaning on the radio, and Chico every time, he went off at turn 6. He went off at turn 6. Let the organisers run it. Let the organisers pick track limits. Because I think track limits actually has been working really well. I mean, they are observing it. They got the idea now that that's a wall. I don't want to damage my 2 wheels. Instead, I don't want a 5-second penalty. And I think it's good. It's beginning to work.
Well, we'll come on to Porsche Supercup in a moment, where I don't think it works so well at the same circuit. But Ocon,
another crash dive as well at that chicane where George did was Ocon taking that. This is another thing we had to discuss in a way. Poor old Yuki Tsunoda qualified 8th, had a good qualifying because Gasly was having another miserable French weekend. He couldn't get his car to work in qualifying. But Ocon smashes into him on the first corner, and gets the traditional 5 seconds for causing a collision. But it's the question of whether you say, okay, causing a collision, what happens the result of it is irrelevant. You must have the same punishment for causing a collision, whether it's a tap or because when, Yuki's out for the race and Ocon goes on to be the best French finisher in 8th place or wherever he finished, it doesn't seem just, does it? And I think there has to be a different penalty Well, then you'd have to have an opinion of a steward because it's not a written rule.
That's dangerous.
What damage you cause? Would you not think that should be looked at, though?
Yeah, I do think because a 5-second penalty for ruining someone's race is just horrific for the other person, isn't it?
Yeah.
There's if you ruin somebody's race, there should be something more significant. But you're going onto dodgy ground there. But I'm with you because it's nothing worse. You know, we've all been there where you have your race ruined within the first corner, and then and the other person goes on and finishes on the podium,
wins a race or something. Yeah. So but it'd be hard because of course once you set a precedent, you know, you'd have to say okay, you know, if someone retires that you hit. So say you could do it later in the race. If you've caused a collision, then if that bloke retires, you then have a drive-through stop and go, something a bit more serious. You know, maybe you have to wait until the other car's damage has been analysed, but then you'd have to write a rule because you couldn't have an opinion. You can't have, you know, okay, well, what should we give? Make one up. You've always that's the trouble with Formula One. There has to be a specific penalty for every offence. Otherwise, the stewards are accused of, you know, changing their minds, not being consistent. But I think if the car you hit retires from the race, I'd have a drive-through stop and go.
And a drive-through stop and go at Paul Ricard would have been one of the most severe ones because it's about 30 odd seconds just to go in and out of the pit lane. So I'm going to ask you a couple of questions. So a couple of drivers that are they performing or not? You've just mentioned Perez, and he had his little purple patch, and we thought he was back, and Motorsport UK mentioned him as well.
When he won Monaco because he crashed in qualifying and stopped Verstappen out qualifying him. Let's always remember that. He's very good, very, very good, and we all love him. But
do we all love him? I don't. I think he's very dull, to be honest with you. Yeah, I think he's quite dull, to be honest.
It's a bit moody, a bit Latin American moody at times.
All right, well, let's go on to someone that's never moody, but should he still have his seat? Daniel Ricciardo. This is a big thing. He has been completely and utterly outclassed in qualifying and racing.
I think he'll go. He was hanging on, the shirt tails of.
But why not go now? Rebuild, regroup, get rid of Daniel. He's the nicest man on the grid. He's the happiest man on the grid. He's such a brilliant man to have around. But get rid of him and get somebody else in now, ready for next season.
Yeah, but the ones they want committed elsewhere.
They'll all do it. They're doing IndyCar and all sorts of other stuff as well. But
I'd put a temporary junior in. You know,
me too.
Maybe just someone. Okay, you haven't got a deal for next year, but we're going to give you 5 Grand Prix out of the blue, but no contract for next year. Yeah,
it frustrates me so much. There's some, Pistari, Oscar Pistari.
Piastri.
I beg your pardon. But what an amazing opportunity for someone like him.
He's a Renault contract.
I know he is. I know.
Actually, Ocon might have to go as well because Ocon, you know, Alonso just keeps on beating him and. You know, Piastri is sitting there. He's the official Alpine test driver, isn't he? Reserve. So,
that's brilliant with Alonso, by the way. Hasn't he done well? It's just he's making me my hat because I'm saying, he's too old.
I know. I wanted to go. I want another seat for a youngster, you know. But he does keep on performing on track. Bless him. He really does give everything in the races. You know, he jumped the start, made a fantastic start. And who was he ahead of? He was ahead of George, wasn't he? Poor old George had to sort him out before he could go and chase after the others. So he's still there.
In terms of old dogs,
Sainz, you haven't mentioned the Ferrari thing or Sainz talking number 2 drivers. I think Ferrari were completely right. I think that was just because Sainz was being exciting and got 3rd place. Well, he just taken 2nd or 3rd place, hadn't he? But I think they knew the tyres wouldn't last. I think that was the thing. You know, because he started on the whites, which everyone else was now on, and he was now on the yellows, which was why he was moving up so quickly. But I think they knew the tyres would have worn out. He had to have a pit stop at some stage. So maybe best to have it now. So I think it's a bit harsh to criticise Ferrari for their tactics. Okay. Would you disagree?
Well, I do a little bit at the time, but just think that if he kept going, unless it was a risk and the canvas going to come through and there's a chance for a blowout, then I probably would have preferred to see him. Because all the tyres were going off ever so. So he seemed to have more pace than anybody. He got into 3rd place behind Lewis, but
he was on yellows. He was on fresh yellow tyres. So,
but I just think it was quite funny. The whole Ferrari thing. It gets endorsed when you have them telling him on a team radio, "Pit, pit, pit." After they've just said, "No, don't pit." And then they say, "Pit, pit, pit," as he's doing a mega overtake move.
Well, yeah, but that was to us, then, wasn't it? They relayed the transmission, you know, not live. So obviously that had been told to him maybe half a lap earlier, but we saw it being said just as he dived up the inside. It was a bit like poor old Charles, which I think was live, which some people started thinking, his throttle stuck open, But that was when he was buried in the barriers, trying to get reverse gear desperately. No throttle, It was most dramatic on board. That would be the headlines, I think, in what's that Drive and Survive, that thing program, that fictitious program they do once a year. Yeah, that would be big time. The scream, every poor old Ferrari mechanic in the pit box.
Yeah. So Paul Ricard, a masterclass from Max Verstappen. He was very patient. Didn't do anything silly, which is good to see. So he's maturing. Lewis Hamilton's 300th Grand Prix, second on the podium. So very, very, very solid for him. Do you know, since 1992, so for 30 years, either Lewis Hamilton or Michael Schumacher have won in a race. Won a race in a season, since 1992. Isn't that an incredible stat?
So Lewis has got half a dozen races to get that to another year.
Yeah. Have Mercedes got a race win in this season? They have, haven't they? Because look at last season. Ocon won last season, a Gasly won, I beg your pardon. So, there's always that sort of one bit of a fluke and something going to happen.
Hungary next weekend. Hungary, a lot of corners, not many straights. That will suit, because obviously the Red Bull's got this straight line advantage at the moment.
Yeah.
So anyway, there was lots of stuff to talk about, even if the race was so frustrating. But we had the action of George and Perez.
Yeah, not much action, but there was a bit of action. Okay, so
all right, Formula 2, plenty of action. Formula 2. As always, the sprint race was won by someone that qualified ninth. In this case, Liam Lawson won the sprint race, having qualified ninth, started second. But actually, he's highly rated, Lawson, before this season. He's a Red Bull protege. And he started the season really well, finished second by Theo Pourchaire, another highly rated star for the future of Bahrain. But since then, the championship's gone in a different direction. We all thought it might be Pourchaire versus Lawson for the whole season, but neither's really been knocking in the wins. And this Felipe Drugovich, I'm sure it's not pronounced like that because he's Brazilian, has been piling on the points and leads the championship. But the main race, we had another Red Bull. Last weekend, we were talking about Formula 3, when I pointed out that the French kid, Isaac Hadjar, was, a surprise winner, but he's suddenly coming up. And this weekend, it was another Red Bull slow burner, Ayuma Iwasa, who got a great pole position and walked away with the main race. So a couple of Red Bull boys that we might hear of a lot more in the future. We need another Japanese driver. Yuki's still having troubles. Maybe could we look at Yuki's seat saying, I'm the best Japanese driver.
Yuki's been a bit unlucky.
I know, I agree. Yeah, I think Yuki deserves one more season. So give Iwasa, because he's a rookie season F2 at Iwasa. So give Iwasa a second year of F2 would be my advice. But it's funny, isn't it, how your results? I mean, he was French Formula 4 champion in 2020. They did Formula 3 last year, but was 12th in the points. You should think, okay, he's not really that good. He won a Formula 4 championship. He had one reverse grid win last year. But this year, he's been really showing form as a Formula 2 rookie, and the car suits him. So a big grinning Japanese kid on the podium, which is nice to see. Porsche Supercup, we always mention track limit. I mean,
hang on.
Did you watch it?
I did see. Well, I wanted to see Harry.
Harry King. Yeah,
Harry King win. Obviously. So the track limits were a joke.
Well, no. So obviously they didn't have any. I mean, this is what nobody announced. The commentators didn't even mention it. But to me, it was a great. If you watch both that and the Formula One, it was a fantastic demonstration of how well it's working in Formula One, because they weren't wild and silly. Even Formula 2, they're learning now because so many got excluded and penalised in Austria. But the Supercup, I mean, so someone dives up your inside and does a reasonable overtake. And so what the bloke on being overtaken now on the outside did was just stay full throttle, go shooting completely off the road, keep his momentum and rejoin the track, still holding the position. And it happened time and time again. And they were just straight lining the corner where poor old Schumacher got pinged, which I was so harsh because Mick was he was going to be a top 10 qualifier, maybe, They had that bollard, didn't they, on the right, which unfortunately was just over a car width from the track. So he probably sort of apex on the bollard and he just got all four wheels inside the white line, which I think you can't shortcut apexes. It gives a huge advantage. So he was pinged. But every Porsche was just doing every lap and they were just going right up us. So if you watch the Porsches, that's why we need track limits. Otherwise,
Harry King, he
got his second place.
He was elated with his second place. He was very happy with his second. It shows how tough it is out there.
But he was a second behind for the whole race because he doesn't get going. He didn't get going very quickly in the British Grand Prix race. He seems to be that first lap's not his best, and he's to sharpen up on his first lap pace. But all of a sudden,
I can give some tips there because I've only got one good lap in me. That's the first, and the rest of it's rubbish.
But Harry caught him the last couple of laps. He suddenly went half a second. I don't know whether the guy in front was backing off a bit, or they had team orders, maybe, let him catch up, but don't let him past. But yeah, it was great. Harry was delighted, quite so. They've got a 5-week break now, so he's only got 3 more goes this year for him to win.
I hope he wins.
They've got Spa. Spa is great, actually. He races in the Belgian Championship as well, Benelux, Belgium, Luxembourg, Holland. And he's had a win at Spa, I think. And at Zandvoort as well as around. So also he's raced and won at Zandvoort this year in the Benelux Championship, then at Monza. So Monza's a bit of lottery in Porsches. They'll all be bashing each other over. But yeah, come on, Harry, 3 to go. But yeah.
We want a Harry King. Run. We want a Harry King win. Should we go on to W Series? Is it time?
Yes.
You're never ever gonna guess who won. It's gonna shock you who's won for the 7th time in a row. Jamie Chadwick.
I mean, I don't know. I saw a tweet today. I bet they regret bringing her back. Because she's making all the others look average, and unfortunately, when she's been out in the real world, she's been a bit average. So, but I mean, I think we've got to keep up. There was Jenny Gow tweeted,
I saw it.
Why hasn't this woman been offered the best Formula 3 seat? Well, because there's about 15 Formula 3 drivers and 15 Formula 2 drivers that have done better than her and deserve the drives more. And the trouble is, you have to look outside what Jamie's done. I think Jamie, actually, she knows, in my honest opinion, she had an F3 offer. I think I would gamble a few hundred, 10 quid, that she had a decent Formula 3 offer. But she knows if she goes there, she's not going to be winning.
She's going to be exposed. Enjoying this. And I mean that in the nicest possible way. I mean that in the nicest possible way. She is super talented. Look, she's blowing this field away. Week in, week out.
It was a bold move. On that first lap move around the outside, she didn't make the best start. She put back in the 3rd place. Was it more white line controversy because she got pinged for leaving the pit lane? But she's a wonderful ambassador for women drivers. And the whole W Series, what people must just hold back a bit. The idea is that it's now getting 8-year-olds into karting. It's getting more girls karting. We will find, as we keep on saying every week, Louisa Hamilton or Maxine Verstappen. We will find that brilliantly talented girl one day. But she's not on that grid yet. So, you're not going to get someone leaping.
So what would you do, and our listeners, what would you do? Because you can pretty much guarantee you're going to get $500,000 a year, all of your motoring paid for, no sponsor worries, nothing whatsoever. And
ambassadorial roles. She was at the French Open tennis, wasn't she? She was at the tennis. She's a celebrity.
You can go and join Formula 3 or Formula 2 and you can finish at the back of the pack. Yeah. Literally making excuses like I do every time I go out and race and say, the car wasn't on it or the tyres or this or that, because that's all it is. She's not. There are so many people that would just absolutely blow her away in Formula 2 and Formula 3. And on Twitter, people are saying she should have a Formula 1 drive, which is very, very naive because she's just an incredible ambassador, incredible driver, but she's just not that. She's not the world's best. And if you look at everybody as an individual, whether they're male, female, whatever they happen to be, she's not as good as others.
She's bravely talking about doing Indy Lights. I think she's always got offers from all over the world. Simone Di Silvestri. There are plenty of teams that would run her because she's a very publicity savvy girl.
Well, she's brilliant. Yeah. She's squeaky clean. She's fun. She's articulate. She looks great. She ticks every single box. But
I think she should get a good GT drive going because of course she won the GT British
Why would she want to leave W Series? Why would she want to leave ever?
Well, you could have more winners in GT3 racing. You've got a co-driver and everything else going. There's a lot more involved in finishing well. So.
She will never ever leave W Series as long as she has.
As long as they let her race. As long as they let her race. They've got to stop that. Otherwise, the others are all looking stupid. Because it's the same girl winning. Oh, Abby Eaton. I have to mention Abby because what a shame. She qualified her best 6.
She had some bad luck.
Well, it was people moving a straight line. We talked about this, didn't we? We talked about it at the British Grand Prix. We talked about it after Belgium, Austrian Grand Prix when Gasly hit. And I think it was the girl. She was in as I've written. I think they're both a Marcia sandwich, a Spanish sandwich. So the girl who was second on the grid made a bad start. And the girl, so Abby Easton was the right-hand side. And the 4th place, Marcia, made a bad start also. but still moved left to try and go round the car in front of her. And they just squeezed Abby. Abby was going into a space much quicker than the car in front of her, and they just moved too much on the grid, and she was taken out. I was happy her neck didn't get damaged again. She was right up in the air, crunching them. Yeah.
She had some airtime again.
It wasn't good for the rest of them. Alice Powell, fifth, which for her isn't very good. You know, she'd be very upset probably being fifth. And Sarah Moore, Abby Pulling, Jess Hawkins, 8th, 9th and 10th. So apart from our queen out front, it wasn't such a good weekend for the British girls in W Series.
Okay, so let's go over the pond. Let's go to NASCAR, where there was, don't tell Lewis Hamilton, but there was plenty of booing in NASCAR.
Oh, his daughter came on. His daughter was in tears, you know. Yeah. But it's like they have the family. I don't know whether the daughter was in tears because Daddy had won the race, you know, and become the most winning Pocono driver.
Denny Hamlin, we're talking about. By
this
the way.
Is Denny Hamlin, who won on the road. We'll come to that one later. Because he's had this grudge with the Melon Man, Ross Chastain. Chastain's a hard racer, but he's been a bit clumsy a couple of times. And unfortunately, both the times he's been a bit clumsy is Denny Hamlin, the veteran, the number 11. He's put Denny Hamlin in the wall twice. And Hamlin, I'll get back to him. They have this thing in NASCAR. You don't go to the regular, you don't go to the rule makers and get one race bans. You just say, I'll sort you out later, boy. Don't you worry. And so there was I think last weekend they were in close. I think it was... Chastain was right on Hamlin's tail again last week, and we were all terrified he'd hit him again. But it came to pass on a restart with about 36 laps to go. The front row lineup was Denny Hamlin on the inside and Ross Chastain on the outside. And this track is the Pocono. They call it the tricky triangle because it's got 5 corners or only 3, depending on how you add up corners, which in NASCAR is quite confusing. And it's quite a flat track, but they can run about 3 lanes around there, so three wide round the corners. So it's an entertaining track. There've been loads of exciting racing spin outs, as usual NASCAR drama. But off they go on the green light. Hamlin's on Chastain. Chastain decides he's going to go round the outside of Hamlin, which, if you thought about it, I think for about 3 seconds, might have thought maybe I should duck out of this, but. Hamlin duly went wider and unnecessarily wider. And oh dear, you haven't got much room now, and you're on the dirt, aren't you, Ross? He's on the tyre rubble, and of course he hit the wall.
So if anyone didn't see the interview afterwards, he said, "Well, what do you want me to do?" He said, "As long as I'll keep doing it as long as until he gives me respect." So he wasn't backing down at all, was he?
No, Hamlin's manners. He's got a bit of a nasty manner at times. I think he doesn't sort of try and. I mean, Ross Chastain tried to laugh it off a bit. You know, do you think it's over now? And Ross sort of, well, I hope so. So I hope so. The Melon Man. The trouble is, when you take revenge. It's not just the bloke you want to have revenge on, because of course Chastain spun, you know, he was the front 2 on the grid, opening lap, you know, there's another 30 cars coming behind you. And unfortunately, or luckily, only one hit him. And it was the 4 car of, I forgot his name now. Why do I start these things without writing enough notes? Anyway, he's having a rotten season, and he was the one that nailed Chastain. It was only a 2-car crash, so it did take someone else, an innocent party, out. You're taking revenge can cause problems for others.
I can't stop looking at their flares on their race suits, the NASCAR boys.
Yeah, you got to have flares. You got to have flares.
Have you ever owned a race suit with flares?
However,
have you ever owned a race suit with flares? I need to know this.
No, unfortunately not. The IMSA boys, the Corvette boys stood up at Le Mans, don't they? The IMSA boys wear the flares. I'd quite like a pair, to be honest. I would. But of course, it wasn't all joy at the end, Denny Hamlin, because they got disqualified. He and who was coming second.
I'll tell you. I've got it on my nose.
His teammate. It's Joe Gibbs' teammate, Kyle. Yes. So Kyle, they were both Kyle Busch. Not last. So the 2 Toyota, the Joe Gibbs racing team cars, have both been disqualified since the end of the race for apparently some dodgy aero stuff going on the front of their front fascia. So they both got pinged. They obviously appealed, so the results are still pending. Chase Elliott has now been awarded the win in his Chevy, so it's an Elliott win. So, which is a shame for the Joe Gibbs team, because another great story, another sort of thing you'll get in NASCAR you'll never see. And we talked a minute ago about Ricciardo stepping down to give a young driver a chance in a Formula One car. Now I'll get all the names wrong again. Kyle's brother, Kyle's brother.
Mr. Busch, Mr. Busch's brother.
Kyle Busch. Kurt. So Kurt Busch had a big shunt in qualifying, banged his head. Well, it was a big impact going backwards, and they wouldn't let him race. They checked him out. So they always like to run someone else, reserve driver going to car. So he raced also with Joe Gibbs' team. So they put 19-year-old Ty Gibbs, the grandson of Joe Gibbs, who's won. He's in the Formula 2 Xfinity. And in fact, on the Saturday, he came second in a really exciting finish with Jack Gregson battling to the line. So he came second in the Xfinity race. So he said, okay, you're in Formula 1 tomorrow. Well, do I test the car? No. well, do I get some practice laps? No. We're going to put you on the grid, at the back of the grid, in a Formula 1 car, and you'll be racing in the Cup car, which you've never driven tomorrow. And
what other top leading motorsport would you ever do that? So
anyway, he stayed on the road. He was very sensible. He finished 16th out of the 33 car field or whatever it was.
35. So Kenny Hamlin finished 35th in the end. That's
in that position. Like that. Yeah. So it would have been such a good story. With the Joe Gibbs cars finishing first and second, and Ty Gibbs finishing 15th, 16th. So it would have been a wonderful party that night. Instead, it's all a bit gone scandal.
Yeah. Oh, well. So I would like to say it was a bit more exciting in IndyCar, but other than them looking fantastic and great camera work, it was boring. It was going.
I know
300 laps.
I'm not sure. Yeah, all right. Don't overdo it. The 7/8 mile Iowa track, and I'm a bit with you on this one. I know it's wow. It is a bit wow. The good thing is they can go 2 wide, or in some cases we'll come to later 3 wide because it's quite a flat track. And they've got this grip stuff and everything else that helps. Was that a Pecona? I'm getting mixed up now. Is it NASCAR? Well, they put extra grip around the outside so they can go.
I don't know. I didn't know that.
Anyway, the funny thing is, it seems like the sort of track that only about 4 cars made their tyres last. And it seemed to be a regular bunch out front. And everybody else would spring. I mean, Ericsson was just storming from about 15th to overtaking everyone around the outside in race. Well, it was 2 races, a double-header weekend. And all of a sudden, he's just falling backwards massively slower because the tyres go off. And you have people that have been lapped, real backmarkers that have pitted earlier coming, and they're overtaking the leaders because they've now got fresh tyres on. So you get this bizarre jumble and variety of speeds, which makes the whole thing weird to watch at times. It is hard to follow those races when there's just so much. But there's virtually sort of 3 cars that dominated all weekend. The 3 cars that got their setup right, Joseph Newgarden, Pato O'Ward and Will Power, were just always running sort of fairly nose to tail out front. Well, everybody else went up to the front, down to the back, up to the front, spun off and everything else. So Newgarden just cruised the race 1 and was cruising the race 2 when he had a suspension failure after about 250 laps. It was 300 laps, the second race on the Sunday. Had a big shunt. He seemed all right afterwards, but he fainted later on in the evening last night.
That's right. Yeah, but that was because apparently he fell over. They said that wasn't connected, but it wasn't
a faint. Well, he's had all the scans, I think. So I don't know the full result, but hopefully he's perfectly all right. But Pato O'Ward, who followed home in second on day 1, won the second race because he was like the second best car. Will Power, who had been third in the first race, came second in the second race.
It
just seems like.
Best name for a motor driver. If his name was Max, that'd be better, wouldn't it? But we'll take.
So it was a funny race. Those 3 sort of had the car set up that worked.
Jack Harvey, British driver, didn't do very well.
He qualified about 8th.
He was doing well in
race 2.
Yeah, and
then he just dropped like a stone. I looked at him. He was 8th, and then he was 9th, and he was 8th and 9th. Then they went to a commercial break, and he came back, and he was like 16th and 17th. They just, as soon as the tyres go, you're just struggling to hang in there. Callum Ilot's really doing well now. I mean, he's in a single car team. He hasn't got a co-driver, teammate that he can get set up from. And he had a 12th and 11th. And he's really beginning to shine, Callum. So hopefully he's got an IndyCar future ahead of him. He didn't quite make the Formula. Maybe he'll come back to Formula 1. Maybe McLaren should put him in.
Do you know what? He's a lovely lad as well. He's a really nice lad. So
of course, you've got talking of Americans from McLaren. You've got Logan Sargent. Actually, no, he's a Williams driver. He was unfortunate, Logan, because he was because he's had his 2 poles, he's had the win and stuff. He was right on the pace again in Paul Ricard, and then he had a pit stop when something worked. He never came back out again.
And it doesn't matter where these kids are. If they got immense talent, someone like Toto Wolff or whoever, get them into your team. Get them in.
But actually, the star of the IndyCar for me was Jimmy Johnson, because here's this 48-year-old. I haven't got his age right. He's old, not as old as me, but he's old for a racing driver. And of course, he's given up NASCAR. He's in that wonderful NASCAR race to sort of have a test himself in IndyCar. He didn't do the ovals last year. He just wanted the road courses to experience that. He was always right at the back. Anyway, he was making turn 3 work, lane 3. I mean, nobody else was. On the onboards of Jimmy, he had a spin, I think, in race 1, recovered. And he was going around the outside of people in the 3rd lane, right next to the grey area where all the rubble is. If you get 2 wheels right in the grey area, you're in the wall. And he came through the 5th place in race 2, overtaking round the outside. So Jimmy Johnson made the whole watching that race to be worthwhile.
And I can tell you that Jimmy Johnson is 46 years old. He could be 47 years old on September the 17th. Shares a birthday with my dear old mother. So
who races the number 4 car in NASCAR? I'll get that in my head.
I don't know. Who races number 4?
That's the trouble. You always remember the numbers. That's the way NASCAR do it in the 4. It's always the number 4, the number 18. I can remember all the numbers more than the names. It's always the way. But he's the former champion. I mean, it's ridiculous for me to remember his name.
NASCAR, Kevin Harvick, of course. And he was having a miserable year, miserable season. He's in the final 16 on points alone, but then he got taken out by the spinning Ross Chastain, thanks to Hamlin taking revenge. So I know you love your NASCAR and your IndyCar, and it's brilliant that we do motorsport from all over the world. But this weekend there was British GT at Spa with some amazing driving, great overtaking, and we don't. There's only so much
overtaking. I am talking about overtaking on a scale that we just don't even have any idea of in Britain. In fact, next weekend, which we'll come to shortly, but I'll mention it now. If you gave me a first-class ticket to watch the Hungarian Grand Prix or a first-class ticket to go to Indianapolis, this weekend at Indianapolis, there was a NASCAR race on the Saturday around the road course and an IndyCar race on the Sunday. Now,
but Tiff, that is the experience. That is like Indianapolis is incredible experience.
Well, yeah, but they're not on the oval. They're not on the fame oval. It's the infield circuit that was built for Grand Prix cars before the tyre fiasco. So where would you rather go then? I'm giving you a first-class ticket. You want to go to watch the Hungarian?
Do you know what? I would go to America because it's just a bit of a crack, isn't it? It is the experience. But
no, just for the racing. You're not allowed to go. You're not allowed to go and visit the local town or anything. You're just going to be flown straight to the racetrack and sat in the seat at the grandstand.
Absolutely, no question. I would go to Formula 1 because you've got Formula 1, Formula 2, Formula 3, Porsche Supercup, W Series. It's all there, and there's no question.
Line astern round the twisty turns of Hungary. Line astern, the lap after lap.
Okay, let's move on to British Superbikes.
Yeah, the only big event in Britain last back to our British shores was the British Superbikes. Glorious Brands Hatch Grand Prix circuits. I watched a bit of it on telly. I didn't have time to watch it all, but I mean, huge crowd. I mean, that's entertainment. I mean, you've seen those bike boys. And it was out front. There was sort of 4 of them in most of it. He was 3rd. But it was mainly this battle between the teammates, the 2 Yamaha teammates. Because Jason O'Halloran had well away of the championship and he won the first race. But his teammate, Taron McKenzie, who was injured in training, I think, over the winter. He's taken a long time to come back from his injuries. And they've had a bit of a summer break. So Taron was really on it finally. And he won the last 2 races. So he beat Jason, his teammate, for 2 races. I mean, the final race, they were like rubbing shoulders coming through clearways, battling to the finish line. Just amazing stuff. So great entertainment. But O'Halloran's well out from leading that championship, so I don't think he'll be caught.
Good. So next week, we've already mentioned Formula 1, Formula 2, Formula 3 and W Series from Hungary. That you think
where you'll be sitting in your grandstand. I'll be in Indianapolis, sitting in my grandstand, watching 2 days.
With the double header there, IndyCar and NASCAR. World Superbikes go to the Czech Republic. What's that circuit like? I don't even know what it's
called. I don't know. Most. No, I'm not sure what Most's like. I don't think cars used to race there way back.
BTCC are back at Knockhill. My goodness, that's going to be a demolition derby. That is, for those who don't know, Knockhill, it's in Scotland, and it's a very small, twisty and turny, and has some big undulation as well.
And the only way to overtake is a little nudge on the bumper of the car in front of you, which is still allowed in touring cars to a certain level.
I wonder which they'll go the standard way, because Knockhill's one of the few circuits in the world that you can run clockwise and anti-clockwise. So
yeah, they only go the standard way. They should go the other way. They should have the second race or the last race, reverse grid and send them the other way around.
Wouldn't that be brilliant? The Formula E's
are in London. I haven't seen much publicity. You can go along to the Excel Centre, not exactly city centre racing, but of course it's the only place in the world they race indoors. I mean, how exciting is that? Nowhere else they race indoors. That's big publicity.
Yes, it's huge, Tiff. So what's your predictions for Formula One? So far, last year, the FIA helped Max Verstappen win the title. Looks like Ferrari are helping this year. Do you think he's going to do it in Hungary? Who's your top three for the podium?
Oh, I'm hoping Lewis is going to win Hungary. I'm going for it. It's going to happen. Lewis is going to win.
I'd like to see Lewis, just to keep that 1992...
Turn one's always dodgy. Turn one, we could easily lose 2 of the top 6. We don't really want 6. I want 6 cars battling to lead the Grand Prix. That would be stunning.
More mature Max Verstappen. He will not be going for any. You heard it here first. He will not be going for anything crazy on turn 1.
No, because he's with a points lead like he's got. He doesn't need to, does he?
Yeah. Oh, and on the point side of things, I think it's very important to say that Mercedes are only 44 points, I think, behind Ferrari now, which is just incredible. That just shows the consistency is what it's all about. Slow and steady sometimes, but Red Bull look like they're running away with the Manufacturers' Championship. We don't really care about anyway, but there you go. Thanks for joining us this week. We'll see you next week.
No booing me. No booing. Booing.